Welcome to the Rite of Passage podcast, a show focused on turning the camera around and interviewing the photographers, the surf shop owners, and today, the shapers that define the industry. Historically, the path to becoming a notable shaper was exclusively decided by the network you carry. And while that network is still paramount to respect and earning your chops in the industry, the world today, the rise of social media, and the internet have provided unique opportunities for a new generation of hand shapers and new methods for becoming notable within this mecca of surf culture that we live in. Today, we're joined by Kurtis Woodin of Woodin Surfboards, a local hand shaper here in Southern California and somebody that has a really unique story of coming up through the ranks and making his own way to notoriety within the shaping industry. We're thrilled to dive into some of Kurtis's inspirations, heroes, and war stories from a life in the boardroom and out in the water. A true rite of passage. Kurtis, thanks for making the time and joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
So let's kind of go right from the beginning. I think anybody that shapes a board obviously probably starts in the water surfing and developing a love for it first, because it takes such a commitment just to get into shaping and shaping a board, the amount of time it takes, the love that you need to have for the sport as a whole kind of speaks for itself. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your early days and getting into it and your kind of beginnings with surfing?
Yeah, so like most of us that grew up near the coast or in a general area, even if you're living a little further inland, you visit the coastline, and all of us that did that usually were on a boogie board. And so as a childhood, going to the beach, my parents, we go to Lake Havasu. So I was always in the water doing stuff like that and having fun. And then, fortunately living down the street from the beach, I, picked up surfing with friends, and it just it was something where kind of got me away from, the stuff that we all, like the video games and the other stuff where, we all played soccer or other sports, but surfing was something that was always just there and available. So didn't really take it like, oh, it's going to be a professional surfer or anything. It was just a fun activity to after school and then kind of in middle school, before school, and then during school with surf PE. That's kind of the beginnings of it. It was just kind of it was just something always there, and it's still always there. Like, it's only us in our lives kind of taking us away from it, and it's kind of like, hey, let's just go to the beach and check it out.
Yeah. How do you, I want to get it a little bit into kind of surf reports and forecasts and how that may impact someone like you, because you strike me as the type of guy that might not even look at them.
I mean, back in the day, I mean, there was no surf line or anything. So fortunately, living near the beach, you just wake up,
look outside.
Literally, yeah. I wouldn't even, I'd have my window open and I would feel the breeze, and I know it's a south wind swell, or south winds. So I'm like, don't even look at it. Or, my parents would give us, tide calendars for Christmas. So that was always my tide chart. And then what's it called? Freestyle watches had the tide charts. So I was like, everything relied on the tide, and it still does. But the main thing is really, just looking at the winds and the tides, and usually that's the good case of, like, for Southern California, you're gonna find some waves.
Sure. I would say, beyond, especially here, that was kind of news to me. I cut my teeth surfing in Oregon, where the wind is as important as any other feature, and it doesn't matter if it's south or north or onshore or offshore, there's going to be a wave somewhere. Yeah. So you kind of had to hunt and find it. And then I think coming down here, people can be more reliant on there being a wave at a certain window in the morning virtually every day.
Yeah.
So they don't have to develop that skill at all. But when you get to the point where you're talking about where you could walk outside and you can kind of just like, put a finger in the air, it makes it so much. I think it's a real skill when you can get to the point where not only it's going to be good, but which wave will be the best based on that very little bit of intel.
Yeah, I mean, those before the surf line and all that stuff. Definitely just honing into that skill level of just predicting, where it's going to be good. And now with Surfline, I mean, like visiting the East Coast as an example, those guys know the intervals, all the stuff going on, which I don't think a lot of the guys here on the West Coast don't really think about that as much because they're kind of like what you're saying with Oregon, you're driving like 30, 40, 60 minutes away to go because this wave's going to be good because the winds are looking good over there because there's all these little nooks and crannies where here in
It's
Southern,
protected.
yeah, whereas in Southern California in this bay here, we're kind of like centralized. We got our own little hub. A lot of us, growing up younger, you're traveling and surfing and exploring, but I just think it's more of a um, you know, like we're finding, we're staying to our little areas. We're not traveling as much. So
Yeah, that's true. At what point, it sounds like surfing has always been more of just a recreation and a part of your life than maybe a competitive aspect. What was the timeline in your life where you were first introduced to shaping and getting into that side of the business?
So probably a couple years into surfing, I was needing a board, and I was just riding parents' friends boards and friends of friends boards, and then getting used boards, and um, my parents' good friend had a friend that made boards, and so went over to his house to shape me a board, and that was like kind of my first experience seeing the how to build a board.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of knew what I wanted, so I was I drew it all up, colored it. I knew the dimensions without knowing anything about it. I just knew that from the magazines. And yeah, just it was just a cool experience, from a backyard shaper. And then
And what was that first board? What did you go with?
it was a 9.4 23 and 3 inches thick pintail nose rider. I remember it like it was yesterday. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, yeah, I remember picking it up from his house, and that was cool. I traveled with that board, to Hawaii, all up and down, and then how it all always goes with most of us, to get another board, you had to sell that. So
Yep.
sold that a couple of years later, a year later, something probably not, probably a year later, and met up with a guy named Gary Seagraves in La Jolla, and um, he kind of took me in, and he was kind of my shaper for a few years in those developmental years of me surfing and competing, and he sponsored me, so I was
Mm.
getting boards for nothing, for cost. He wasn't really charging me anything, and so my mom or my dad, we'd drive down to La Jolla, go to Mitch's, buy the blank, because and I'd pay him like 40, $50 to shape the board for me. I'd hang out there, go surf, and then my parents would pick me up later in the day. The board would be done, put it in a bag, a plastic bag, and then take it here to Oceanside to the glassing manufacturer. And I learned about the glassing process. And then, my dad, he's a general contractor, and, he's a very handy guy. He knows how to build stuff. And I remember when I got that board from Gary, and being in the bay with him, he's like, "You think about making your own board?"
Mm-hmm.
Because he could see the picture of like, it's not. I mean, it's not rocket science that we're doing, but it is. There is science to it all and development. But the tools, to make a board, you can go to a Harbor Freight or
Sure.
any hardware store and buy these tools. But the skills are there. But I thought it was gnarly, like I just saw this guy whipping around a planer, just knowing what he was doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was really cool being around that, that experience as a kid. And I mean, he definitely was one of the guys that kind of um, pushed me to do what I'm doing now. He inspired me for sure.
That's awesome. And as you were kind of moving through, you said you were just shaping them and then you were getting familiar with the glassing process, but you weren't glassing them in the early days, or were you taking boards all the way through pretty early on?
My own boards.
Yeah, for your own
Um,
boards.
so yeah, start to finish from the beginning.
Okay.
The only time I outsourced my boards um, in the first 100 boards was because I couldn't glass out of my mom's house.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it started in my mom's house in the backyard in a tin shed. And after about 40, 50 boards, I had the fire department show up with a police officer.
Sure.
They literally just walked through the yard and they caught me with, my gloves. And the guy was super cool about it, but he was like, hey, we got a neighbor who's complaining.
Right.
Or they don't know who it is, but I know who it was now. But he basically said they're gonna always. It sounds like they're gonna keep complaining until you stop doing it here. So it kind of shook, ruffled feathers and shook me up a bit. And so I outsourced some boards because that was right when I started making boards for like friends
Mm-hmm.
and doing, a board or two a week, maybe a handful a month. Wasn't full time, of course, but and then initially my dad had a yard that he was renting here in Oceanside, and I got a tent. I bought a tent at like Harbor Freight or whatever it was. I don't even remember. And was glassing some of my own stuff there, and then eventually I saved up and bought a shipping container, and that lasted for 6, 7, 8 years maybe. And then I finally kind of was able to take the next step of having a factory and being
Mm-hmm.
kind of official, I guess you could say, and take on the responsibility of a bigger overhead. And whereas the surfboard industry is a very funny industry. It's very hard to get into. Not really into, but just to make a career into it. And then the regulations and all that, and the surf, with the chemicals and
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff you have to deal with. It's a big overhead leap where to make those numbers,
Right.
it's
Could be daunting, I would think.
yeah. And living in Southern California, the price of living, and now having a family, it's quite a bit. It's a lot of guys um, don't want to take that initiative because I mean I understand that. It's kind of being in my mid 30s now. I'm like, this is my go time. I have to work as hard as I can to build my brand, so in my later years I can kind of not have to put as much energy into all this and have some type of, it's hard to have sustainable um, residual income in this industry, and a lot of guys I'm learning from everyone in this industry because the customers want the brand name, but they want the person with the name on it too,
Mm.
who's touching them. A lot of guys are quickly learning that having a new label or a label that has your name on it, but it's not you touching them. They're quickly learning that it's not a fast sell,
Right.
and it's great to see that because we're customers have the choice and they're not choosing that, so it's kind of like, okay, I'm like, well, I only can produce so many boards a year, and I'm trying to justify my income, and my maximum. And when you're getting into this industry, you can't think of it as money, but when you
Right.
take it in as a business, you have to start thinking about how your expenses are, of course, like anything. And yeah, there's a lot to go into it, like any risk in business.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take some risk, but you got to um, have a plan.
Right. And I got to think forecasting out that first big leap to you're calling it the official shop or production facility. You don't know what you don't know. And you
Yeah.
don't know how many boards you're even going to be able to move, let alone what you can produce.
You don't you're thankful if you can plan it a few months ahead of time. So, yeah.
How about, so I've heard this a lot from shapers that I've spoken with in the past, where they always talk about a point in their life where they, were riding friends boards, like you were saying, like they get out there in the water and they're getting on whatever they can, and then all of a sudden they start to request their own, they get into shaping, and then they shape what they know they want. It sounds like that maybe happened a little bit earlier for you. You knew right away in your first design, this is what I want, and I think you had a natural proclivity to it. But specifically, the moment I'm talking about is they would know what they want, then hop on the board and feel that, versus riding another board that might be what they want or it's close, which is probably more like where me and most surfers are. Like when we're coming through a showroom like you have here, and we're looking at all these boards, we're kind of like, oh, well, maybe that'll get me closer because it has this or that. But I mean, just in the time that we've talked through your boards, you've pointed out 4 or 5 things I didn't even realize make a board do what it does. So as a shaper, you have such a understanding of what the board can do for what you're looking for.
Yeah.
That takes the guesswork out. Did you have that same experience the first time when you ordered it, shaped it yourself, where you were just like, oh, I'm never buying a board again, I'm going to make my own boards?
It was really more of my budget. I mean, when I got into board building, I mean, like the first board I ever made was an old board, and I ripped it apart because it was delambing, and it was around the Clark foam time, which was like the dark ages kind of for surfboard industry. The major blank manufacturer went out of business. I remember I was in Hawaii with my dad, and it was like in December '05 or something like that. And I remember we opened up like the Honolulu Times, and it said, Clark foam out of business. It had some type of, headline, but it was like, whoa, what's going on? And then talking to my shaper, Gary, he was just like, oh man, it's like, because I was talking about getting a board made, and he was just like, I don't know if I can find a longboard blank. So it's a really dark time. And then I graduated high school that same year, and then quickly trying to figure out going to junior college, what am I going to do in my life? And so it was kind of like a time where I was had to become an adult almost. My parents were still, I was able to, if I was in school, not pay rent at my mom's house, but I had to figure out my own stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
taking on some bills, and had a part-time job always, and it was just kind of like, what's going on? It, yeah, it's just it's a it's tricky, it was definitely a learning curve, so picking apart boards, I just couldn't afford it, a board. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was getting boards for nothing, and then boards were up to $1,000 a couple years later, and I had no money to do that. So it just kind of my mom's boyfriend shaped boards too for fun, and he was a general contractor, and so I was surrounded by guys like my dad and like Gary and some other guys and later on that were just very handy
Mm-hmm.
craftsmen, and so it kind of gave me a little bit of like, maybe I can do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I was a massage therapist before that. Before shaping boards, right out of high school, I went into massage school. Like after a couple semesters of junior college, and I was like, I'm just floating through the system. I'm like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
So the massage therapy kind of helped me find within myself, mind, body, all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. Where I found, like, I realized, like, self reflection, especially when receiving a massage. You just have time on the table, you're laying down, and you're, just releasing all the, stress at a young age, not that much stress, but, definitely some mental stress.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, like, I'm a surfer,
Yeah.
like I grew up near the beach, fortunately, and there's, you know, everything, all my friends, all the connections I have are all from the ocean. And I was taking like doing the stressing of becoming an adult. I wasn't really surfing as much because I was stressing on career. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're all taught, really, especially our generation, with got to go to college, got to figure out this, and so shaping a board, making myself a new board, like anything, it's like receiving a new board is just like the greatest feeling, it's just like, it's instantly self-rewarding.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just get a new board, so I had to just make it myself. And instead of partying late nights with friends and typical things you do in your early 20s, I just was shaping my own boards, just locked in my shed. And some of my friends thought I was crazy. It's like kind of like a, what are you doing? Like, but I was having so much fun. And I'd be in there from 4:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, till like 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
What about inspirations, heroes, people that you've looked up to from the shaping industry? Is there anyone in particular that stands out?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, I draw inspirations from everyone. I mean, this kind of sounds cliche, but um, from all sorts of different people, even in different industries. But uh, I like to just, I'm always curious, and I observe just how everyone runs their business and how they're going about it. And sometimes you get to meet the person and you kind of can see like, oh yeah, this guy likes to do, like, you can see this is how he's running his business without even asking how he's doing it. You can just
Right.
see how it, I mean, with the internet, it's like that. Cause back before, social media, you go on a website when like the internet wasn't that developed. It was just like, you just see this photo, or in a magazine, that's all it was,
Right.
which is still key to look at like cool board designs, looking at old magazines and getting inspiration. But on social media, you just literally run through all these people and you see like, thousands of guys making boards, and it's just like you draw inspiration from all of them. And everyone's inspired by everyone else. So, it's cool. Like I've just learned not to like focus on one person. I mean, we're all kind of, you can see the cross pollination. you know Intentionally, when I first built, I was doing a lot of crazy, trying to innovate some cool designs. Like my first board that I tore up was a finless board, with a blunt nose, very narrow, very parallel, with a double barrel with this little channel in there, and wide base, and it was a single concave and a flat edge. It was just all this crazy technical bevel rail. It was just all over the place. But um and then I was making some crazy boards, like, and then when I first went to Japan, one of my first accounts there, he that's what I think he liked my stuff about, was because I was like thinking outside the box, doing crazy stuff, and he wanted that. So he'd order like onesie twosies of random designs, and he'd throw me some ideas too, like, hey, what do you think of this, like a diamond nose, and like put a concave in the entry of that, and like maybe a channel or two, just throwing some crazy stuff. And I was like, yeah, cool. Cause well, getting into for me to take on like a career or like a path, I have to have a way. And I found a way in the surf industry of like geometry, symmetry, understanding that. So I have ways of displacing things in a mathematical way. And I have, the knowledge too of, being able to surf and know where these things work. And a lot of it is mathematical.
Mm-hmm.
So having a number where I had a path to, set my designs and all that, that really kicked it, that really put me into overdrive. And then I quickly learned, trying to make this a full-time career is like, not that many people, I wouldn't say interested, but they're kind of standoffish. Like, well, that's a crazy design. I don't know if I really want to try that. It's getting people in to buy your board. So, you know, going with, staple of different designs and just putting your own spin on it, with common designs like the fish design,
Mm-hmm.
the nose rider. And, my most popular longboard is the One Love. And it's just a classic single fin longboard, you know, um, square tail, squash tail. And it's not that wide. It's just kind of average. And the nose is full, about 19 inches. It's just a 50-50 rail, up rail. It's just very simple, but it pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm constantly, I literally, I can I can build boards my whole life and keep creating new designs. Like I have right now like 20 models that I have in a catalog, but realistically I have probably more than double or even more than that just in designs that I have um um like ready to go and written up. So it's kind of like, but it's constantly growing. And then I take things away and then I bring them back up and
Mm-hmm.
um
Are you building a board for the surfer's ability level or for what the surfer says they want to be able to do with it?
a mixture of both. So, say you have a customer that's been surfing for a few years, they've been longboarding, they're having fun on it, but then they can't really ride that longboard on a medium-sized day or a little punchier wave. So, I have certain designs and I can create custom design that's going to help them, get on a smaller board and, be able to, of course, catch the wave, but actually surf the board. So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna try to sell a customer on a board, especially a stock board, if it's not the right fit. So depending on the size, the build of the customer, I'm gonna set up the sizes and then their skill level is how wide it goes and how much rockers going on and where they're surfing. So there's a whole different little things, nowadays you got leaders, which is it's I understand that for the customer, like as a new surfer, I get a lot of those people that ask about the leaders, and it's something that I didn't grow up with. I grew up just knowing like the dims, and those dims seem to work well with that person that suits that person's surf ability and height and weight. But it's a good tool. The volume, it doesn't really explain that much, but
Mm-hmm.
there's calculators that big surfboard manufacturers have that you can go online and type up some stuff like some dims, and they can explain like a rough estimate of volume. So it's kind of for me, it's like a back engineering, like, okay, this is kind of like the number that if
Right.
somebody asks me, I can get back to them in like a few minutes, just going on a website and checking it out and
Give
seeing.
them the ballpark. But I think it's more interesting when you're looking at it from a verbal, like, here's what I'm looking to do. So if I am I've gotten pretty decent on a mid-length to longboard shape. So say like the Bing Collector, like an
Yep.
8 foot board. I have one of these. I can ride that thing pretty well all over, but sometimes I feel like it's super slow on the
Yep.
waves. What would you recommend that I get into that maybe even could go a little bit shorter but be faster?
So I'd recommend the you said the collector, or
Mm-hmm.
so the collector is a pintail.
It is a pintail.
Yeah, I think I know which model that is.
It's
Um,
kind of just a fun board. It's
and
got a
the rocker is
yep.
there's
It's
plenty of
I call
rocker,
it the banana.
and that's what's creating maybe some of the drag, maybe.
Yeah.
So going a little bit, hiding that rocker in there. So it's all about displacement. You don't need a banana to just be able to, not plow that nose, and a lot of it's the tail rocker that's kind of helping to pop up the nose up when you stand up on a board.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to recommend a model, that would probably be like my Gypsy Eye model, where you could ride that in like a 7.6
Mm-hmm.
or something in the 7 range, and you can go up bigger, but that size you would still be able to get a lot of speed. It's really the bottom's really flat, but it just seems to it carries a lot of speed right off the
Okay.
bat, and it's a good board to transition from even riding a bigger board to get on a shorter one. That board seems to connect with a lot of people. Like, I mean, it connected with me instantly, and I was like, "Damn, this thing's cool." But it's really up to the people, to make that decision. Like
Sure.
certain things, I'm like, "This is awesome, I love it," and certain things, I'm like, "I don't know." And then everyone's different. But that model just seems to, from uh, expert shortboarders that are wanting something a little bigger and saying like even bigger, like 6'6"
Mm-hmm.
instead of their 5'8", 5'10", they're going on a 6'6" of that model, and they're stoked on it because they instantly can, swing it around and perform on it to intermediate surfers going from longboard or a mid-size to a shorter mid-size board, and it still can carry, they can still connect with it. So, I like to even say, like, if you brought that board in there, in here, um, and you tell me like all the stuff that you're saying, I can point out why
Why
it's
it
doing
is
that.
doing that.
And I'm just learning from that too, because it's good hearing the feedback from the person explaining like, oh, I'm noticing it's like kind of dragging here, and I'm not being able to build up as much speed as I want. Um, I'm purling, like, as examples, like, oh, I'm like, when I paddle, I'm purling the nose. And sometimes I've had somebody tell me like, oh, I don't like this board and all that. And I'm like, bring the board in.
Yeah.
And they see the fin, and I'm like, the fin's in the wrong spot. I move the fin in, I move the fin, and then they like message me a day later, like, oh, the board's amazing, and I just lost the sale. But then it comes back though, like a couple years later, his daughter ordered a board. 6 months later, he bought one of my stock boards here. He
Right.
was ready.
It comes around.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not gonna
Because
try
you
to
build trust.
exactly. I mean, I like, as a massage therapist, I learned this, and as a board builder, I do the same thing. As I'm facilitating massage therapy was I'm facilitating health and wellness, and in surfboard making, I'm facilitating education and stoke. I'm just trying to educate them all. It's all about education on your side a customer, as a surfer, because if you're growing from that, you're improving, which means you're having more fun. You're just getting more, and that's what surfing is all about, is having fun. So that's kind of like how I go about it. It's just like that's what we had, a dark era in surfboards in the 90s, because everyone was riding these toothpick shortboards, and there is a big gap in that time period of new surfers. And so like the average surfer now is like in their mid 40s,
Mm-hmm.
like that hung around, like our generation, that kind of gap, young kids. And I know a lot of guys that went to high school with that were excellent surfers. They gained a few pounds. They try to get back on their little tiny board, and they're just frustrated like they were in high school. And I talked to some of the guys that are, they were always open minded, but they love shortboarding. They were great surfers. And I see them now, and we talk to each other. We all have families, and we're still, I grew up in this area, so it's like, it's a small community.
Sure.
And they're just like, you're right. Like, you guys riding your longboards, we thought those were the kookiest things ever. And, you guys did it. More power to you guys, like what you guys are doing. Because most of those guys that rode shortboards don't even want to touch a surfboard anymore, because they're
Right.
still relishing in that.
Like it's over. Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved shortboarding. I appreciated it all, but I just knew like where I grew up surfing at Terramar, there was no there was only a far in between day, a few days that you could ride a shortboard.
Mm-hmm.
But I was stubborn riding a lot of longboards and mid-sized boards, like kind of fun boards. But now, I mean, especially since I was able to build my own boards, I can make as much boards as I want, really, for my budget. I was riding all sorts of, I'm always constantly riding different boards all the time, which is humbling.
Yeah.
And every board's different. It's not like you can, it's every board's, you have to surf it different. You have to approach it different. And that's what I like. You can get good at one board, but it's
Right.
like, that's not what surfing's not about.
I think that's a really fun part of surfing, when you get to that point where however you get them there, you bring more than one board with you, right? And I heard Joel Tudor talking about Skip Fry telling him when he was younger, when he was only longboarding, and he was like, "Why are you bringing a longboard to this wave? Get off that thing." So picking the right board for the wave is something I always try to be prepared to do. So like when I go to the break, I'll bring 4, 5, 6 boards in my van with me, so that I generally have something for everything. But I have more boards than that because I've got a problem.
Yeah.
So like every now and then I'll be like, damn, I didn't grab the right one. But it is, you get better and better, right? At like looking at the waves and being like, oh, this board's going to be the most fun. But that is a many year-long process that you will continue to get wrong. And it sure is great when you get it right, though.
Yeah, no, that's what keeps us hungry in that. And and appreciate those things happening when everything lines up together. It's very connected, we're the weather, the wind, the swell, the board, and your mindset, and those are the memories, and then we're always chasing after that.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a very, it's almost it's like a drug almost. It's just like, it takes you on, and then you're constantly like wanting it and chasing it, and um then and it's humbling though too. You get days like I get on a board and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I'm just, mistake after mistake, um and then I'll, won't surf for a couple days, and then I'll come back and I'll ride a different board or that same board, and I'm connecting with it.
Yeah. It's weird how that works. Like some days the water doesn't weigh anything and you're just kind of gliding around, you're catching every wave. Next day, same board, can't surf.
Yeah.
Um, Another interesting thought on surfboard design. I'm interested in your perspective on this. There are boards that I will have a very bad time with for a while, and it's like I just keep not having a good time on it, so I put it on the shelf, and I walk away from it for months, years, even at this point. In one particular case, and then randomly just take it out for whatever reason. It just happens to be there when I was thinking of a certain wave condition, and it's like, oh, well, I'll give it a try, and had the most fun I've had on a surfboard in a long time. Those experiences are really unique and kind of almost tricks people like me that have this problem to like hold on to every board. Like I haven't really sold many of my
Hmm.
boards. I just am like saving up money, buying another, saving up money, buying another.
Yeah.
And then but there's inevitably ones that you just won't use for very long periods.
Yeah.
And you go back to them, it can either be a very bad experience or it can be an
Yeah.
incredible one. Have you had anything like that in your own shapes?
Oh yeah, yeah, all the time. I still have some boards that haven't seen the day of light in probably like 10 or 12 years. I mean, they might have a blown out fin, or fin box, or they're just. I have a little collection in a shed, just sitting there, kind of like just sitting there, and then I've learned not to get too attached to my boards as much, so I'm kind of, you know, I'm I've learned to just sell them. And
Move on.
I was always like that as a kid though, because my parents helped pitch on my first custom, and then I was on my own. I had to figure out my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So so I was you know putting a sign on my mom's car out in front of Terramar on a nice sunny day, kind of like today, just good waves, um and I saved surfboards for sale. And I pointed an arrow down the beat, down the street, and then I'd have them laid up in my mom's front yard, just up against the siding of the
Mm-hmm.
house. And I have guys cruise by, hear the brake stop. I'd be sitting there chilling, eating food after surfing, and then I'd go out there and then call my shaper the next day, and I'd be like, "Hey, can I make me another board?" He's like, "Come on, bring a blank back." And kept the cycle, and in order to build this brand, I had to do that. Really, I was just constantly just cycling boards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have somebody that hit me up that he's friends of friends, and he saw one of the boards for sale like a few years back or a couple of years ago, and he has like number 3 or something, which is cool because I remember every board. So
Sure.
yeah, it's like I
I mean,
see.
that's pretty impressive though, because you've said you're around like 300 boards a year, maybe career average there or thereabouts,
Mhm.
over 10, 12, 15 years
Yeah,
now. I mean,
yeah,
that's thousands and
yeah,
thousands
a
of boards.
few thousand boards. It's 3,200, and like right now it's like that much, and like maybe 60 or something,
I can't
60
believe
something,
you
70.
know that number.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I constantly write him up every week or
Sure.
something. I'm writing it up, and um, I'm always just tallying, keep tallying and tallying, and um, yeah, but I remember almost every board. But maybe some of the clear boards I've done, which is not that many boards that are clear. I sometimes get lost because
Mhm.
they're just so simple. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
Mhm.
just plain where it's kind of generic. I'm like, but the colorful ones, I instantly know. I remember those
Yeah.
certain periods where I was or where I was in life, and like what I was trying to go for. Maybe the little things I think I could have improved better, constantly. seeing that.
That's
So
cool to attach that, like what you're going through and how that expresses itself in your designs as well.
yeah, and I love sharing that with the customer that brings it in because I'll tell them that, and they're like little time capsules. You seal them up, and then they're gonna live longer than like well longer than me. These boards are gonna just keep living on, and that's what we're seeing now. With these older boards come up, and you got guys that collect old boards, and um, we just can't forget that these boards that we're making now are going to be soon old too. So
Hmm.
it's interesting. And like any art or artist, your art, the value of it goes up when you die. So it's like anything, or you're getting
Right.
up there, the value, supply and demand.
For sure. Well, Curtis, I think that's all the time we have for today. I had a great time talking with you. I'd love for you to just let anybody know if they're looking to get a custom or reach out to you. What's the best way to find you?
So, I mean, you can reach me on my website at Woodin Surfboards, WOODIN. That's the last name. Surfboards with an S at the end, .com. You can check it out. I got 20 models up on the website. I have videos. You can order on there. I'm working on an order form. If you're not local and you can't meet up, you can either email me on the website, or reach me at my Instagram page at Wooden Surfboards. Yeah, just feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions on boards.
Right on, man. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come and talk with us. We're excited to see where it goes from here, and
Yeah.
it's been fun to learn a little bit more about your path through it. I think definitely understanding a little bit from our first conversation beforehand, you saying it being a non-traditional route, and now understanding the depths of that. It's pretty impressive the amount of hours that I know that must have been put in behind 3,000 plus boards.
Oh yeah.
They say what 10,000 hours makes you an expert. You're well past that. So I don't know when you reach master status, but these
I don't think there's ever a master until you're dead. That's when it's like that's constantly learning. So that's I think the key in life. I don't know. I'm not no guru or anything, but it's just like constantly putting yourself in situations and learning. That's kind of where we grow. No matter how frustrated you get, it's like maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. That's take it day by day.
amen, man.
Thank you,
Well,
Steve.
thanks again for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah.